All right, everyone. We're a little light still. People will get here shortly, I believe. How's everybody doing today in class? You can hear me? Thumbs up, thumbs
Good.
down?
How are you?
All right. Very good, Al. I got that. So, let's see. There's some class material. I'm going to post a link in the chat for those of you that want to follow along. It's up. It's up on our class Dropbox. All right. So let's see how I can do this.
Did you say Dropbox?
I mean, Google Drive. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yep. I am a little spaced out. Okay, so let's see. Let's get this. Get link. Copy link. I'm going to post this into the Dropbox. I mean, into the chat. Sorry, I keep on saying Dropbox. That's one. We have 3 topics to go over today. Let's see. Last one. Then there is... All right, let's do this. Let me get it from my class, from my desktop here. And let's just pop this right in here. There's that, if you want to follow along. And let me just compress this. Great. So I'm also streaming this live on YouTube right now. So the class will be up afterwards. My schedule has gotten insane and I won't have time to edit the video and put up a shorter video, but this way it'll just be up. I am making a recording of the class video, so at some point in the future, I'll have a little bit more time and I'll make a condensed version of it and I'll pop it up onto the Google Drive and send a link for that. But for right now, we're just streaming live into Zoom and also on YouTube, which has better audio. Okay. Oh, I have somebody talking to me on YouTube, so let's just say. Okay, so today I'm hoping that you will all put up your second draft of the assignment that's due a week from today, and I will tomorrow afternoon get you feedback for that, and we can move forward with that. We're going to be starting to transition away from Midi. I think we have I'm fairly certain that this will be the last purely Midi assignment for the semester, and we'll be doing audio and Midi going forward with a few. There'll be one more class that has a lot of Midi on it. It'll be the talking about drum programming and that type of stuff. So, but generally, we're going to be transitioning into working with audio, not recording audio, but working with audio inside of Pro Tools going forward. So what I've got here is what we'll do is another study score. Okay. So what this is right here, this is the score for the George Lucas. Everybody know who George Lucas is? He's the Star Wars guy. Lucas Works. Whoops. Did a lot of special effects for Hollywood. He's got his big Skywalker Ranch out in Marin County near San Francisco. Very important figure in the history of films. He was honored in 2015 at the Kennedy Center Honors for his lifetime of innovation as a filmmaker and technical innovations that have enhanced filmmaking. And I wrote the score for the biopic that they did. I think there were 3 films on him that year, and I did scores for 3. But this is the best one of it all. And this is not the mixed version. This is the MIDI. This is the last thing before I mixed it. So it's got almost all MIDI tracks, and we can just use this as a study score. And so what we've got here in the chat, if you want to download this afterwards, this is this exact score with all the MIDI information intact, but there are no plugins at all. So in other words, I'm using sounds that you don't have, but you'll be able to open this up and check out the automation, see how I set the session up, see how I organized it. You can plug in instruments and recreate the sounds yourself. And I think that that'll be really valuable. So that's just a simplified version of this with all the MIDI data in it. So what might be really nice is if we actually watched the movie. So let's get this a little bigger. And we'll play it. Here we go.
Extreme close-up!
George Lucas once said, "Deeply ingrained in our reality is our relationship with our parents and kids. That's where the real stories always end up." His story began in an idyllic American way. Born in Modesto, California to Dorothy and George Sr., George Jr. was free to unleash his busy imagination. He immersed himself in comic books, shared adventures with Flash Gordon, and watched radio serials in his mind's eye.
Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men?
And though he devoured novels like Treasure Island, Robinson Crusoe, and the Adventures of Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn, school was a disconnect.
I was a consummate underachiever. I hated school. I loved to build things. I loved working on cars and engines. And all I wanted to do was race cars.
Just days before high school graduation, George was broadsided by a classmate traveling 90 miles an hour. He was found unconscious with no trace of a pulse. The long period of convalescence had a life-changing effect on George. He decided to trade race cars for college. And rather than take over the family office supply business, he would enroll at USC School of Cinematic Arts. "There will be no artists in this family," his father told him. "That's no way to make a living." George's first student film was an avant-garde sensation. He won first prize at 47 film festivals and a coveted internship that led him to his mentor.
It actually came from reading comic books.
They taught and challenged each other in every way. And in 1971, with Francis Ford Coppola producing, George directed his first feature film. THX 1138 was a disquieting look at the future, set in the 25th century. It was our first glimpse of George's desire to reject the status quo.
My first impression was, I hate you. I hate that guy, man. He's so much better than I am.
George followed up his exploration of the future with a trip to the past.
American Graffiti!
His past.
Where were you in '62?
He inhabited every character in the film and defied studio brass by intercutting 4 seemingly unrelated stories, making them work as one, and using popular music instead of a traditional score. American Graffiti was a massive success, propelling George and Lucasfilm into the stratosphere.
What if you came up higher?
It was just his 3rd feature film, and it changed everything.
I know this is going to work. I know it's going to work because it's impossible.
The way movies are made, the way we watch them, and the way they make us feel.
To the world-famous Chinese theater come the stars of the biggest box office success in motion picture history.
No film before or since has had a greater cultural influence.
Put that down. Cigarettes are dangerous.
It transcended the zeitgeist and became part of the American experience.
Well, I'd say cut.
With Star Wars behind him, George bucked the system again.
Hi, Daddy. Ready?
I think the biggest thing on earth.
He retired from directing for 15 years to raise his children.
That's Daddy putting on a Snoopy ornament.
Good morning, Katie.
Hey, Dad.
As his children grew, so did his empire. And his ability to give back. Pledging half of his fortune to charity, he is one of the most prolific philanthropists in the world, having created the George Lucas Educational Foundation at Utopia and the upcoming Lucas Museum of Narrative Art. George once said, "Don't listen to your peers. Don't listen to your parents. Don't listen to your culture. Only listen to yourself. That's where you're going to find your truth."
All right, so that's the mix that's on my YouTube page, which is my portfolio. So the music's about 3 or 4 dB louder than it actually was on the the version that was broadcast, shown at the Kennedy Center Honors 5, 6 years ago now, and also broadcast on CBS that December of 2015. But that's all MIDI, that entire score, right? All the orchestral stuff, all the programming. And again, I realize that some of you don't do orchestral music, but all the techniques are the same no matter what kind of music you do, right? Orchestration, pacing, dynamics, automation, editing, how you set up your session. That should all be those technical things, they're the same no matter what kind of music you're doing. So let's take a little bit of a dive here into this session, and I'll show you some of my techniques. So for those of you that have seen more than a few of my sessions, this should look very familiar to you in terms of how I've got it set up, right? So let's zoom in on these guys here. And let me make this a little smaller and pop it into the middle of the screen. And then let me do the zoom in trick. Okay, great. So at the very top of my session is my click track, although there's no click plugin right now. I haven't opened this session up until this morning. Oh, probably in 5 years or more than that. So I had to do a lot of work to make it like some of the sounds I don't use anymore. I use other ones, and they're not in my new hard drive for my new computer. But as you could see, I've got all my winds here at the top, right? And you could see I've got winds like a section winds. Hold on, let me make that louder. Right, so that's pre-orchestrated winds. I showed you how to do something like that last week in one of the programming. But then I've got just piccolo, legato flute, staccato flute, 3 flutes, legato oboe, staccato oboe, 3 bassoons, low winds short, low winds long. So I've got some solo instruments and some ensemble instruments. That's sort of the way I work. You know, you're not going to, like the way that this sounds, I could program that with all of those sounds on individual tracks, but they won't sound the same because these are all recorded as an ensemble, and that vibrates the room differently, and the players interact differently. They're playing with each other. And so it's really nice to have some ensemble sounds. Now, the problem with ensemble sounds is that if you started to play chords, you'd have, let's say you played 3-note chords, instead of having maybe 3 instruments, you'd have 9 instruments because each pitch has 3 or 4 instruments on it, right? So if you play one note, you're hearing you're hearing maybe a bassoon, contrabassoon, and bass clarinet. And then if you play 2 notes, then you're hearing 2 bassoons, 2 contrabassoons, and 2 bass clarinets, etc. So you can really stack up the number of players, and it tends to not sound clear as having single instruments are. But you can get away with 2 notes, and that's okay. But having that sound mostly for lines in a linear fashion really helps. And then I've got something called a Vca Track, which we'll be going over this semester for sure. And then my brass, I've got solo trumpet, I've got trumpets ensemble, 2 horns, solo horns, 6 horns. And again, varying the size of my ensembles, right? Because if I was scoring this on with pencil and paper or using a notation program to get different effects, I would have a solo horn playing something, just one. That sounds different than 2 horns playing a line together. 6 horns playing a line together sounds much different than 2 horns playing a line together. More power, more overtones. It's just, these are just orchestrational techniques, and you can move those same concepts over into any kind of music you're playing, right? Where you're varying the ensemble size to make it more delicate or more bold, depending upon what the music needs. And then here I've got some just brass ensembles, right? Mid-range brass. Let's get that a little louder. So that sounds like trombones and French horns, low brass. That's such a great sound. And then short, the same thing's short. And then a VCA for the brass. And then I've got orchestral percussion, timpani, snare, gran casa. Does everybody know what a gran casa is? Yeah, you know, Paul. I'm sorry, Paul. I'll answer that when I zoom out because I can't really read what you're writing. Gran casa is a bass drum, orchestral bass drum. Then I've got a VCA for the percussion. Then I've got, the cymbals, bad, very bad. The cymbals should actually be here. Then I've got pitched percussion, glockenspiel, tubular bells, harp, xylophone, marimba, finger cymbal. Oh, that's not really a pitched percussion, but I left it here because of the sound. And then I've got piano, velvet. This is a Wurlitzer sound. And then this is actually an audio file of something I recorded. So there is one little bit of audio in here. And then actually 2 bits of audio. I've got tenors, choir long, choir short. So and then I've got a ton of string sounds. So I've got legato violins, 2 different kinds of legato violins. I've got high staccato strings. I've got spikier violins. I've got low staccato strings. I've got concertino, which is mutes, long strings, low strings. I've got tremolo, pizzicato, and Bartok pits. Everybody knows what Bartok pits. That's like slapping the bass, but with orchestral strings. It's great. Love it. Then I've got strings VCA, and then I've got just on this for right now, because this is not a mix, I've got 1 hall plugin and 1 delay plugin, which is a special effect that I use on the choir. You can't really hear it in Zoom because Zoom is mono. So let me zoom out again and look at Paul's. Paul, if you've got an ensemble that's like a string quartet, you can write more. But if you've got an ensemble of a 24 first violins, that's different, right? So there's no hard and fast rule. You have to look at each sound. But basically, when you've got ensemble patches, you really have to be careful and use your ears and see what sounds muddy and what doesn't sound muddy. Okay, let me zoom back in again. Let me get this down a little lower. And then we could see here that I've got all my memory locations, my markers, where I've marked up where everything in the film is, right? So this gives me my structure. It tells me where what the story is. Star Wars, Buck the System, Single Parent, Skywalker Ranch, Charity Inspiring, quote, and then all the way to the end. And then you can see also I've got quite a few time signature changes, tempo changes, just all the stuff that makes an orchestral score really work. All right, so the piece starts off and it goes up to this point here. So there's about 30 seconds worth of music, and then I have to stop because then there's that Flash Gordon and the shadow, and then the music comes back in. And then also during American Graffiti over here, the music has to stop because American Graffiti has its own soundtrack. So it opens up, right, with muted strings. Let me solo that. Here we go. So let's take a look at the automation. Right? And you could, if I do expression and automation, you could see that I've got both of these things going at the same time. And that sounds simple, but you can actually hear that the track is getting not just louder, but it's getting brighter at the same time. So that there's some automation there. Let's listen to it with the rest of the ensemble. So it just starts off simply. Okay, so it starts off with this piano, and this is orchestration, right? Now, the piano sounds... Okay, sure, Al. I'll do that on the next time I have it open. So the piano has a kind of a sound to it, right? It doesn't sound like... it sounds very dreamy. So let's see how I achieve that effect. Well, we're going to get into this a little bit today as part of today's lesson, but I've put in here, and let me zoom in on that a little. Right? I've inserted, after the piano plugin, an EQ. Hold on. It's on the other screen. Let me get it down here. Right? And this is a filter, and I've rolled off all the high end starting at about 500 hertz and then at a 12 dB per octave slope. And then by the time you get up to 1,000, right, there is nothing coming through. So if I were to bypass this, right, you can hear how it's much different with that in there. And then I've got on that there's this sound here. This sound right down here. I'm not sure what that was. I rendered it as audio. I did it 6 years ago. But that... There we go. But when you layer the sounds together, that's your orchestration. And what's going on here? It's his childhood, right? Childhood. This has an innocent sound to it, dreamy, almost like a music box in a certain way. you know, and you paint that picture with your orchestration. And no matter what kind of music you're doing, your orchestration should help paint the picture of the story you're trying to tell. Story is the most important part of art. Story, story, story. All right, let's take it from the open again. Here we go. Starts off with the strings. And then helping to move it, I've got these very delicate pizzicato strings. And notice, I don't play them. I don't play them down here. Play them up here, pitch-wise, right? I'm just doing this by ear. I don't remember the track. And that's because it fits better. Beep, beep. And notice, so I start off with just the piano. And then there's these finger cymbals that come in. These are really cool. They're very quiet. So you see how I'm layering things in, right? I've got the strings, then the piano combination with the bass, now this, and now the trumpet. And I change the rhythm there and the texture with the piano figure changes, right? And also layered into that with the piano are these choirs. Right. I'll turn them up for right now so you can hear them. So they're layered in there as well. One. Right on second beat. Yeah, Chris, you need to, yes, in order to hear it. Yep. And you'll only hear an approximation because you might not have all the sounds I have in Expand, right? But yes, I put it in there with no plugins at all. It's just this track with all the MIDI information, all the routing, all the color coding, the timeline, the marker, memory locations, and everything. So you see how I'm building up this little area here. And then when we get to this measure here, I'll solo the piano. I'll go from a couple measures before. And now we change. Right, so we start off with this kind of a figure. And now we change the figure. Right? And then I change the texture of the strings. So if I were to just solo the strings, we listen from the beginning of the time section. Or from, right, so this is the pizzicato strings. Muted, right, and then right there, do you see that I went from, I've got these pizzicatos, the figure changes, and then right here I changed the texture. I've got right up in this area, these are muted strings, and then right over here, tremolo strings come in. So you see, that's like Orchestration 101, doing that kind of stuff. Right, and then let's listen to that all with everything else. Right, so notice the piano had the melody at the beginning, and then in the second section, there's a little conversation between the brass and the woodwinds, right? So if I just solo that. Right, that's a solo horn. Oboe, solo horn. Doubled with the flute, right? So the flute is right here. Whoops. Right, so the flute just comes in on the last note. See that how I overlap? I start the flute note while the French horn is still playing its figure. And then the last note of the French horn figure is the the note that the flute is playing, but an octave lower, right? So there's like a little conversation there between the winds and the horns, and let's hear how that all plays together with the rest of the track. And now we've got the Flash Gordon music. And then we move on to the next section where it's more motion, right? I think he's like a little older than a child, right? And so okay. So we start off with that sort of positive and then there are these spiky chords in the lower strings. Here we go. Right, it's like a combination of Beethoven's Sixth Symphony and Copland. So high staccato strings. Here we go. So two of those together. Right? And then, is there anything else? No, it just starts off with the two of those. But as you can see, as the section goes on, you build up more and more instruments. You pass things around. Right, so I repeat that figure that this section started with after that little transition, like sort of reflective section for a few bars, but I don't repeat it exactly. I reorchestrate it. It's a little bit more emphatic now. It's a little bit fuller. You know, I've got, let's see, I've got these. Right, just giving me a nice. So the brass is only playing the bop, bop at the beginning, and the rest of that figure is continued on with the left hand of the piano and the staccato strings. So you see how, like, I'm sort of being really detailed with who's playing what when. It's not just a literal copy and paste. It's figuring out what will help bring out the emotion of the piece, and also ear candy to keep the listener engaged. So this is just Orchestration 101. And also the figure is a little bit more developed than the first time through. It's a little busier, the left-hand figure, the lower staccato figure. And then what's cool about what I do here with the strings is I've got the melody come doubled right here with the oboe. And then it's answered with the higher flutes up here, and then the low winds come in at the second half and pick up what the rest of the lower instruments are doing. So, like, what I want to get across to you all is with this practice, it's so easy to just copy and paste and duplicate things. And yes, there are very successful styles of popular music that just repeat the same thing over and over again. Yep, I can't deny that. But you know, we're in college. we're not doing that. So it's up to me to expose you to things that I think are really important, not only with the technical study of this discipline, but artistic aspects, what my artistic aesthetic is, right? And I think of things as I've said before, very visually, because I've spent my entire adult life working on playing and writing music for visual mediums, whether it's a Broadway show or a film. And all those things have to do with telling a story, and things happen in a story, like, and the more you can, when you repeat something, the more you can keep like if you were to do a piano reduction, the piano reduction would be very similar note-wise. But how can you distribute those notes and spread them out in a way that makes a lot of sense and creates a lot of color change? Okay, so that's what's so great about this sequencing and doing this stuff, is that you can really develop really beautiful orchestrational skills. I was thinking about it this week, and I consider myself now to be, a fairly decent orchestrator. But when I was an undergraduate student at Queens taking my first orchestration course with Professor Berkowitz, who was a master orchestrator professionally, as well as, as an academician or academic, I had a lot of problems. I couldn't get it. I couldn't understand it. It wasn't until I started doing this stuff and started experimenting and playing around with colors and combinations and really just, oh, that's what that sounds like. Oh, wouldn't it be cool if I did this? And I had the means to like really hear my ideas instead of like trying to develop an inner ear from some random academic exercise that was in the abstract, And I remember that the orchestra at the college when I first started my master's degree wasn't as good as it is now. And we had to I took an orchestration course with Professor Musgrave, my composition teacher, as a graduate student. And I had to orchestrate one of the Schoenberg easy piano pieces. And the orchestra tried to play it, and it was a nightmare. And I thought, like, wow, I'm a horrible orchestrator. Well, they couldn't play it because they just couldn't play it. It had very little to do with the orchestrational skills. But the point being that with this study, right, you get feedback right away, right? Nobody has to woodshed something. They don't have to count. You don't have to worry. You just, the quality of your samples can be an issue, but you get feedback and you can do things that give you positive feedback and you can get a win, like sort of like you do something and it sounds really good and it makes you feel good, right? And then you just keep that in your back pocket that, oh, that's a cool orchestrational technique. And as time goes on, you build these things up over time. And the next thing you know, your orchestrational skills are light years beyond when you started. And I'm going to be showing you some strategies to how to optimize your computer in the next part of this class, so you can get more tracks out of your laptops. So that's this is all, I planned this out. This is all intertwined. Okay, so now we're at the car races. This next bit. Oh, I've soloed. Let me unsolo. Right, so we're in the second half of this. Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. No problem. Okay, here we go. I was so wrapped up in talking that I forgot to switch the screen. Oh, well. One of these days I'll have like the computer will automatically know that I want to share the screen. Right, so now, like, you got to think about depth is a very important concept. So at this point, we're leading up to the car crash where he was almost dead, right? So that's more serious. Well, what degree, what depth, how far into like car crash do you go? You have to look at the overall piece that you're creating, and you have to figure out the level. So for me, I just moved down to the relative minor, or I just moved to a minor key, but I didn't make it like really depressing or really over the top. That little move to the minor key was enough change to fit with everything else, right? So that's another concept that I want to get to you is, as you're doing this, start to think about the depth of your emotional expression. How happy should it be? How down should it be? How dark should it be? How light should it be? There are so many levels. I mean, just think of how many types of comedy there are in the world, right? Or just think about how many types of jazz there are, right? There's Dixieland jazz, there's big band swing jazz, there's bebop, there's like the third stream of the new modern jazz quartet. There's the cool jazz of the Miles Davis octet. Then there's modal jazz of the Coltrane, and then there's the abstract jazz of the Miles Davis quintet of the 60s, and there's jazz fusion in the late 60s. There's avant-garde, there's Cecil Taylor, there's Albert Ayler, there's all these crazy cats. There's the Art Ensemble of Chicago, there's Sun Ra. There's so much different kinds of jazz in the world, right? There's so many different levels. And so when you're writing and working on your piece, what are the levels within the confines of what you're working on? And how do you do that, first of all? How do you effectuate those levels? But more importantly, how do you decide what those levels are, right? That's your artistic development, your artistic being that has to get developed enough so that you know what those are. So the first thing I'd also do here to enhance it is, instead of it being the piano keeping the pacing going, I change to a harp. And that's a softer, more mysterious sound. And I've got these muted strings. So if I just solo the strings and the keyboards, let's see, that would be this one here. And then there's some marimba in there. So if I were to just listen to how simple this marimba part is. But it fits beautifully with the harp. And then as we go on, I do add the piano in. Oh no, I add the Glock in. Here we go. I do add the piano in. Here we go. Right, so I add the bells and the piano. Now, if I were to solo the Glock and the piano there. So right here, you can hear that the piano figure is playing the top line of the harp, and the celeste are playing some of those, the Glock and the bells. But not all of the line, right? So again, that's orchestration. This guy here, the celeste, well, it says piano. I would fail myself for doing that, but all this attention to detail makes a difference. It's tiny details, but in the big picture of your piece, it just adds depth. And then the melody's very simple here, right? It's just a couple of little motive. And that's doubled with the legato violins. So that that was prepared earlier in the piece, was that over here somewhere? There's somewhere earlier in the piece I did that same figure, right? I'd have to, it's funny, I don't know my own piece that well. Well, I haven't really listened to this in 6 years, so I'm just going through this now with you. So I'm just going to go, I'm going to go a little further ahead. So we're at the Star Wars section, right? So I wanted to write something that kind of sounded a little, it wasn't, so that it wouldn't be a copyright issue, right? But I wanted something to sound a little bit like John Williams, right? So what I did was like some imaginary piece he might write somewhere, but no melody that he actually ever wrote. So, you know, we're getting to the Star Wars thing, and we start off, we're transitioning after American Graffiti, and we've just got this very simple little bit here. Wow, that tubular bell sounds sick. Wow, that sounded really sour. Well, this is a different tubular bell. That's one of the sounds I don't have anymore. And I just quickly replaced it with another one. Oh, well, it's okay. I'll just turn the volume down. So remember when I said that you have different size ensembles, right? So in the beginning, I've got a solo horn, right? And then let me add a little reverb to that while I'm here. It's a little dry. And then here I've got two horns playing that line up at the top, right? And then now in this section, let's see, I'll just solo this. I've got 6 horns playing this melody here. Right, so you see how 1 or 2 horns wouldn't work here because it's not epic enough or grand enough. And at the beginning, 6 horn players would be too much. So you think about it. If you're playing a song, there might be a spot where there's only 1 guitar playing. And then during the chorus, you might have 2 guitars. And then maybe during the last chorus, there might be 3 or 4 guitars playing, right? So you're sort of layering things in to create textures as you're moving along. So this works really nicely with the brass. Okay, so there's one other thing I want to do right now, and I'm not going to teach you how to do this, but I want to show you the amount of detail I took for automation, right? So do you see here all this stuff in here? This is just, why did multiple trumpets, for example? You know, it's funny, Andrew, my high school music teacher said overtones is the answer to everything because two instruments sound different than one instrument. You got 2 people playing, right? Their sounds blend together and they create a different composite sound. They also reflect off the walls of the hall with more power, causing more reflections, more reverb in the room. So one trumpet, if they're playing unison, is great for melodic ideas, but if you want something with power, you want to layer them together. So let me just, so this right here, you can see, right, so this is mod wheel information. And then if I go to expression Not so much there. What if I go to MIDI volume? There's some there. But you could see I did a lot of automation work in here, right? And that's all part of mixing. No, I don't automate panning, Paul. Most of the sounds that I get and use are recorded what's called a situ, meaning as they're seated. And I just leave it there. Now, that being said, there are times where I do change the panning if I have a different idea in mind, right? But for these big orchestral pieces, there's a reason why there's a sort of a standard seating chart. You know, there's a reason, like we're used to hearing the violins as we're watching the stage. We're used to hearing the violins on the left, the cellos on the right, and the basses behind them, and the violas sort of in the middle, right? The first violins, then the second violins to their a little bit towards the middle. So we're used to that. There's a reason for that, and every instrument gets its own space, right? So that's all set up with the sounds that I have in advance. That you know, they're made. Yeah,
it's one less thing to do.
Yes, but you know, there are times where I change it on purpose if something's getting in the way. You know, I listen. I don't just leave things blindly. So I haven't taught this yet, and I really don't want you to use this because it just makes things messy and confusing. But right here, you can select what you view in the edit window, and I had the mod wheel lane there, and so if I view it back as clips, it moves there. But let me just show, Alan has a question. So let's say I go to my Consordino strings. Okay, so I've got this MIDI volume lane here, right? To close that, there's a little triangle right here. You click on that and it goes away. Now, let me show you something else. If you hit this little plus sign right here, you can add a second automation lane. So I could show MIDI volume and mod wheel. Right, and then you could work on both of them. And then you hit the minus sign here to remove that automation lane. And to remove this one, you actually have to close it with just this triangle right here. All right, so, you know, even though Pro Tools is not known as a MIDI powerhouse, it really, you can do amazing things with it in MIDI, right? Would I recommend this as the door that you go out the door with if you're going to be a composer that writes orchestral music? Probably not. But you could take all the techniques here and port it over to any DAW. And it's more important, it's really important to understand the concepts and the techniques. You know what I mean? Yeah, that's really important. I have no problems realizing anything I want in Pro Tools. But again, I've been using Pro Tools for over 20 years. And I've been sequencing for 35 years. So I've learned a lot of techniques, which I'm trying to pass on to you guys. So any question on that? No questions on that? Okay, let me close this.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. And, you know, all I could say is take in what you can. You know, I'm doing more with this class than I normally do because I have graduate students in this class that have experience. And I've got a lot of people who took recording studio fundamentals. So you don't have to look, that is incredibly complex, what I just played for you. You know, that's the composition is complex, the sequencing is complex, the programming is complex, the whole thing is complex. if you take the concept of automating things and changing your orchestration around a little bit, that's great. That'll be very helpful to all of you. Take what you can. This will be up on YouTube in perpetuity in order for you guys to review this. All right. So, okay. I didn't forget to switch. So in our okay, so there's the AM1 automation if anybody wants to follow along, which is it's in the chat if you want to download it and open it up and follow along. We'll get on to what I just showed you in a little bit more detail, and I want to show you a couple of other things as well. Okie doke. Now, this is really important. If you want to know your system usage while you're working, so actually, I could do this with this. You go to Setup, and at the bottom, no, I mean Window, I apologize. And the very last one is called System Usage. You can open that up, and you get something that looks like this. You guys won't get something that looks like this, right? Because I have a 16-core Mac Pro, so I've got, with hyper-threading, 32 cores. But you can see, actually, let me close this for a second. And let me open up that George Lucas thing again. This will just take about 30 seconds to open this up. So you can monitor how much usage, CPU usage, your computer is doing. And what I would say is if you're working on a laptop, you should have every other program closed, especially Chrome. Chrome uses up a lot of your RAM and CPU. Okay, so let me go to Window here. System usage. Let me zoom in a little. So you can see up here at the top, I'm using 14%, 21%, and I'm using 17% of my RAM. And you can see what each core is doing. You guys might have 8 of these, or, or 4 of these, or like 6 of the, you'll have less than this, but you'll be able to see what you're using. So, I got this huge thing going. And I'm using about 20% of my CPU's my computer's resources. So you can monitor that for yourself. Okay, let me open up that other bit again. So let's get into like doing practical stuff for us at the level that we're at. So in other words, what I just showed you is the possible, right? And what I'll show you now is the practical, what you guys can use in your projects. Okie doke. Let me make this bigger.
Pete, where's the chat again? I'm looking on Classroom.
Oh, you're on Google Classroom, Al?
Yeah, should I not be?
No, you can be. So in the stream, you're in Audio Midi 2. In the stream, class materials for today. AM1 automation, and then you should download the AM1 automation. I put it up at 5 o'clock this morning.
It says couldn't preview file. You may be offline, or I don't know. All right, hey, clicking it anyway. Nah, you're saying it.
Here, so Al, Okay, I see there is an issue with that for some reason. Let me show you how to fix that. All right. Click up here, open a new window, and then right here, there's a little download arrow. Just boom, download it.
Oh, wait.
Al, do you see up here?
I see what you said. Open new window. Open a new window.
Right, and then in the upper right-hand corner, there's a download icon, which is a downward-facing arrow into a little.
Yes, I see it.
Into a tub. Into a tub.
Right, and I'm up to where you are now.
Right, so then download that, and then you can open it up.
Download which one of these? The AMI automation?
Just click on the download.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
We went over that last winter, man. All right. Okie doke. So here we go. Let's. I've got short examples here, and these are things that you can use. All right. All right. So just a little ambient, kind of thing. So let's look at the patch I've got here. Let me make this even bigger. Whoops. Let's get right in there. There we go. So if I click here and expand to, I'm using something called Blend, Flute 2, and Strings. So if I were to play this on my MIDI keyboard, you can hear that there are two parts to that sound that they programmed in. Now, how do you control some of that stuff? Well, there's nothing here that indicates that there's control. Like right here, it says fades from flute to strings on info. But if I click over here on the smart knobs, over here, part A, there's a blend delay and a blend rate. So what happens if I hit the blend delay and bring it all the way up? You see that the flute played and then the strings came in? Let me play that with one note. Flute, strings. Right? And then what if I bring this down a little bit so that it's a little faster, the strings come in a little faster. All right, blend rate. What does that do? So if I bring it all the way here, I think that might be the fastest. Did you hear that little, right? If I slow it down a little bit, all the way. Interesting, right? So you can play around with that. That's kind of interesting. Let's I'm going to move it a little bit. Okay. So that sounds a little bit different than the other way. What if I wanted there to be a little bit more of a slow attack to the sound? Well, I could move either on easy, it's got an attack, or I could go to the smart knobs here in part A and I could make the attack longer. But for right now, since there's no other instruments in any other slots, I can go to the easy one and I can move the decay and it'll see that's a slower attack. Now, see how I'm sculpting the sound to fit the piece, right? The next thing to do is the way I'm listening to it now. the filter cut, it's too bright, right? I want it to sound like this. That's still too bright. I don't have another filter there. So let me go back here. So I've got my cutoff filter all the way off. Right, so see, that's much brighter now. And it's chilly. So what if I want to do something where it starts off darker and gets brighter and like that more chilly sound as, or frozen, almost icy sound as it unfolds, right? So in other words, I want the cutoff filter to start off here and end up here. How do I do that? Well, it's very easy. If you right click on any of these controls, and this is why I wanted to, everybody to work and expand too, because it's easy for me to teach. We're all on the same page, easy for me to teach these principles to you. So this might not be the greatest piece of, sound creating device there is, but there's a lot of technical things you can learn here. So what I would say is I'm going to right click on the cutoff, and then you get another menu comes up. And there's a lot here to learn, but for today, all we have to do is understand that they've got the cutoff filter routed to a MIDI CC number, and it's MIDI CC 74. There's a reason why they've got forget, and I'll get into that maybe next week, but just on all of these, it'll say learn MIDI CC, don't worry about that, but look at the second one, it'll say MIDI CC 74. So in other words, if I right click here, the attack is MIDI CC 73, the release is 72, the decay is 75, and the cutoff is 74. Okay, that's good to know. So let me highlight the flute to strings. Let me open up the edit window, and let me fit this in here. I'm going to move this off string for a second. So I said that was 74, right? So I'm going to open up the lane. And I'm going to go here, and let me zoom in on this. So the lane view selector, you see it says mod wheel, and then in parentheses, the number 1. Because that's the MIDI CC number of mod wheel. It's MIDI CC 1. CC stands for control change in the original MIDI spec from the 1980s, but now the most people use it as a continuous controller. All right, so you could say either control change or continuous controller, and I'll understand what you're saying. So if you click here, so I'm looking for 74, right? I've got 1, 2, 4, 11, and 64. I don't have 74. But if you look below that, there's something that says add and remove controllers. So I'm going to click on that. And let me just zoom out a little bit. Make sure that your track is the right track is selected before you do anything. Flute to strings. This is the automated MIDI controllers menu, I guess you could call this. And you'll notice it says controllers 1 through 31, which is right here. 33 to 63, and we are 74, right? I think that's the one. Yeah, 74. So if I click here, here's MIDI CC 74. Notice that sustain is in here because sustain is already down. If I click here, you'll see sustain. And sustain is MIDI CC 64. So I'm going to add 74. I'm going to add it. And then I'm going to click OK. Now, we're going to be automating that knob movement, right? We're going to be moving it in time. There's another way to do this. This is the first way I'm going to teach you. And this is, I think, the best way for MIDI instruments. Okay, so let's go here. And now look, we've got at the bottom here, MIDI CC 74. Let me zoom out and let me reposition this so it's easier for all of us. So I can zoom in. All right, so I'm going to click here. MIDI CC74 has been added. Now, unfortunately, you can't name that in every session. It would be really great if you could name that cutoff, right? You can't. So what ends up happening is that whatever value you see it, like you could see it here, but watch this knob here as I use my pencil tool, and I'll do the straight line, right? And I do this. And then I'll, at the end, as the sound is fading out, I'll bring down the filter. So we're going to watch this guy right here. See it? It flipped. And see how it's moving? And then I can do the same thing here. Notice that's moving. It's getting brighter. Now, if I wanted to really exaggerate that, right, I could do something like this. This is probably not very musical, but it'll show the point. Now you see that moving, and it's getting brighter. Very bright. You can see how it changed timbre. And now it's getting darker. So that, for me, that's fabulous, because let's see. If I were to play this thing live, you notice it's got a bunch of knobs on it, right? My right hand would be playing melodies, or my left hand would be playing bass lines. And I'd be moving all these knobs, especially this big one over here, which is the filter, as I was playing it to animate the sound. This is this little mono synth here, right? And instead of, this is letting you do that in the software, which really, really, really helps. It really helps. What is the clips window on the right? What are you talking, Chris? I'm not sure what you mean by that. Oh, this clips window over here?
Yeah, it's that extra window that was open. I think I figured out where the menu was. It's that.
Yeah,
right
that's all the clips that are in your session.
Cool.
These are your tracks on your left, right? So look, if I click on flute to, you're not seeing it, right? So this is a list of all the clips that are in your session. So like any MIDI thing you play will add another clip in here, or audio, and if I were to highlight that, you see how it gets highlighted right here. If I were to click on spiccato, then this becomes highlighted. So this is basically just the clips where they are in the timeline. Okay, so now another cool thing that you can do with Pro Tools is, let's say I'm playing this little thing here, and I wanted to write a chord chart so that I could have a reference to orchestrate this, right? Now, obviously, you can, we've gone over this a little bit. You can click here and see the notation, okay? But what you can also do is go to Event. And right here, there's a extract chords from selection. And then let me reposition this beautiful thing. And you could see here, D5 over C, G sus4 over B flat, C sus4, B flat major 13th, G minor 11. Well, and I'll also put my key in. So that's another little handy trick for you. You don't have to do that. I just thought I would show that to you. So that's event. You have to have it highlighted. Event and extract chords from selection. Now, you've worked this out. You've added in all of your automation. You like the way it sounds. But two things. It's all panned in the middle. You want to have a nice, you want to maybe add a nice left to right pan, and maybe you want to emphasize one note in a chord a little bit more than the other. So yes, you could do that with velocity, but you might want to change the automation in one chord over another. So how do you do that? Okay. So I'm going to make it so that I have 4 of these instruments. And then I'm going to extract the parts from that. So let me show you what I do. So this is highlighted, and I'm going, let me zoom in. I'm going to right click on this, and I'm going to scroll down to duplicate. And then this little menu comes up, and you select what you want to duplicate. I want to make 3 additional tracks, so I want 4 in total. So I've got 3. Then I want to, yes, I want to duplicate the playlist. That's this clip that's right here. We haven't done playlists yet. That's more of an Audio MIDI 2 thing, so don't worry about that. Yes, we want to duplicate the automation. Yes, definitely inserts and sends all group assignments. So, you know, sometimes if I want to create a second part for an instrument and play something different, I will uncheck these, that there's no notes, no clips on the track. It's just the sound. But for this, we're going to do this, and we're going to make sure there's 3. And then we're going to hit OK. And then it's duplicated that, right? So what we need to do next is to clean up our name. So flute to strings 2. And this is an easy way to name things. I'm going to copy all that. Next, I'm going to paste. I'm going to delete 3. Next, or I could just paste over that and then 4. And then I'll also show you what these comments are. Okay. And then I want to make all of these unique clips so that they're named the same as this. So these are all highlighted. So I'm going to do Option, Shift, and the number 3. And now they're all named properly. So I'm going to get to work here. Okay, so on the first one, I'm going to go back to MIDI. I'm going to get rid of some notes, right? I'm going to get rid of these. Let's see. I'm going to get rid of these. And I'm just going to keep the first one my top note. And I'm going to delete. And then my top note here. Delete. And then I'm going to go to my next track. Jeez. Make this bigger. I'm going to close this out and make this bigger so you can see it. So I'm going to get rid of the top note first. And then I'm going to get rid of the bottom 2 notes and keep the middle 2 notes. Like if there's a 5-note texture, I'm going to keep that, right? So I'll keep the middle. I'm just making a choice. So in other words, in the original, there was a 5-note texture. That means that after I've deleted one note, there's 4 notes left. So then I'll get rid of this. So that's my second one. Oh, and there's a bass note here. Whoops. So what I want to do is get rid of these bottom 2 notes. All right, I'll go to the next one. And I'm going to get rid of the top notes. And I'm holding the shift key down, selecting and deleting. And then I'll get rid of the top note. And wherever there's 4 notes, I'll get rid of the top 2 notes. And then I'm going to get rid of the bottom notes. Right? And then I'll go to the fourth one. And I'm going to get rid of everything but the top note. So, I mean, everything but the bottom note. So if I were to open up notation and select these 4 here, you can see I've got the original bit, but now it's split up into 4 parts. So you won't be able to hear this really well on Zoom because it's in mono, but I can now pan this one to the left. I could pan maybe this one a little bit to the left, this one a little bit to the right, and this one pretty far to the right. Very conservative one. Okay. So now, as I'm listening to this on my headphones, I've gone from something sounding right in the middle to something that sounds like an ensemble, where there's some on the left, some in sort of towards the middle and towards the left of the middle and right of the middle, and something all the way on the right. And that adds a lot of depth. And then I can go in and adjust some of those automation parameters if I'd want. So that's a cool technique, I think. Now, let me show you something. So let's go back to my screen. So you can see over here, I've got the comments section open. And basically what I did was I wrote in here the things I wanted to show you. So the way you can show the comments section is if you click here, you just make sure it's checked. If it's unchecked, you don't see it, but those comments are still there. And if you double click on the name, the comments are right here. Right? So that's pretty cool. Okay. So now, what happens if you're working on something and you got your laptop happening and you're starting to run into problems with Pro Tools is not working and responding, and it's starting and stopping? What's happening is you're probably overloading your CPU and RAM and all that stuff. So here's a little trick to help you out. You can do something called freezing tracks. And what freezing tracks does is it makes a temporary audio file of the track and places it in the instrument, in the track of the instrument track, and it mutes the plugin. So let me just show you what I mean. Right here, you got a little like snowflake right here. You see that? I've zoomed way in. It's huge. Let me zoom out. If I click on this, this is now a temporary audio track. So these are all audio tracks now, and you could see underneath them, right? They've got the Midi notes there underneath, sort of layered underneath, but these are audio tracks. And if you look here, expand 2 is all grayed out, and it's got a little snowflake to the left, which lets you know that it's frozen. And this uses up much, to just play back audio files, uses up much less CPU power, especially if you're using Contact or some CPU hog plugin, instrument plugin. And also RAM, it uses up less RAM. It plays back the same. It's just that it's playing audio back now. And what happens is that Pro Tools creates a folder called rendered files. And it stores those temporary audio files in there. So, very important, if you are going to send me a session to work on and you've got your rendered files, if all you send me is this guy, the PTX file, I won't be able to, access these rendered files. That's why it's important to get into the habit of zipping up the session folder right at the beginning, even if the session file is sufficient. It's just a good habit to get into. All right. And you notice over here, the little frozen icon is white. And now to unfreeze those tracks, right? You just simply click on that and it goes back. Boom. And let's see what happened to our rendered files. They're still there. So they don't disappear, right? But they're temporarily in the session. All right, so the little snowflake right here above the metronome. And you use that when you're working on your laptop that might only have 8 gigs of RAM and you're starting to really struggle. You can really expand the capabilities of your computer and what it can handle.
Professor?
Yes.
Is it then easier to make the audio files, to turn MIDI into the audio files through that way instead of using the other way?
What is the other way that you know? This is Ashley, is that correct?
Yeah, it's Ashley.
See, I know your voice already.
I don't remember, but a couple semesters back, I had turned some of my MIDI files to
right. So
audio.
there's another right. So there's another way to do that called commit, and we're going to get into that later on in the semester. What's great about this is it's easy to go, if you want to go back and re-edit the MIDI after the fact, all you got to do is push that one button, and it goes back to being your instrument track. So for when you're working on your track, this is the best way to work. When you're going to mix your track, it's better to use what's called commit so that it's baked in. All right. So that's what I would say about that. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Yeah. As you're working, use freeze. When you're done working and you're ready to mix, then you commit and you mix as audio file as audio.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep. That's how I work anyway. And I think it works really well. Okay. Let's look at another example. So what did I say for this? Okay. So this is a little spiccato string patch. Okay, so I'm looking at the time now, and I think that I'm going to stay doing this work. And the third thing I was going to go over today, we will do next week. It's perfectly fine to do next week. It might actually be a better idea to do it next week than this week. So we're just going to stay working on this automation stuff here, and that'll be the whole class. Will be about, automating, because that's what I showed you a lot of, and orchestration. So we've got a spiccato here. So let's open this up. Okay, Kevin. Right. So the assignment is due, finished assignment is due next Monday. Right?
Yeah, I'll have my next draft by tonight.
Yeah, because I'm going to go over them tomorrow afternoon. So anytime tonight or tomorrow morning for anybody's assignment, hand it in so I can go over it and like notate that you've done it. Okay, so let's look at this sound. So it's got an EQ here, right? What happens if I play around with the EQ? Radically changes the sound of the sound, right? What about start time? Okay, so let's look at what the EQ is. Midi CC 16. And let's look at what the start time is. That's 16 and 17. Okay. So I'm going to open this up. And I'm going to go down here. And I'm going to go to add and remove controllers. 16, so that's between 1 and 31. So here's 16. Excuse me. I'm going to hold down the shift key, right? So they're both selected. And I'm going to add both of them, making sure that spiccato is selected here. And then I'm going to be okay. Now, I go here. And we've got 16, and let me just close this for a second, and let's open this up, get this up in the corner here. Let's go back down here. All right, so let me have a concept. So I want to start off a little darker and make it brighter, and then we've got this downward scale here at this part. So maybe I'll make it so that it's getting a little darker, like they're playing it a little less intensely as it nears the end. So let me get my pencil tool, and I'm going to do this again with the straight line. So what I have to do is I have to find a spot that starts where I like it. In terms of the tone. Still too bright, so I'm going to use my grabber tool and just bring this down. So actually, now that I'm thinking about it, there's two ways I can play this, right? Let me just close this for a second and then we'll look at it. I could play it so that it gets gradually brighter like this and then gets less bright here. Right, so let's listen to what that is. And also, let me fix the velocity there at the end. Let me do this, bop, and then I'll do a nice crescendo up here. Yeah, that's better. Okay. Let me go back to 16. So that was one way that I could play it. Now, if I wanted to get rid of all this automation here, let me lose my own picture in here so you just see what's on the screen. If I double click in here and just select all of that, we went over this last week. Don't click up here so that all the notes are selected, but down in the edit lane, you click and then you hit delete and it gets rid of all that automation. If you were to do it up here, it would get rid of the notes too. So that's like a negatorio on that. Okay, so what if we did this? I hit click there and click here. So I've made, let me zoom in on that so you can see what I'm doing. All right, so I've clicked here. So I've got do, and then that repeats, right? So what if I want to make this one darker, this one a little brighter, this one darker again, and then even though the scale is going down, what if I want to gradually make that brighter? So I start off here, which is, I'm going to put a little click here with my grabber tool, right? And that adds a data point there. And then I'm going to click here and here. And then what I'm going to do is use my trimmer tool. Whoops. Right? And if I just hover in here and click, I can drag up. You see how just the area between the two dots I clicked in is moving up. So let's take a listen and let's see what that sounds like. Now there's a little click. Did you hear that? Right here, there was a little click, and that's because of how it's all moving. So you have to do a little bit of work here. So instead of being right on the grid with this, I would use the slip mode and use my grabber tool and start a little bit before. So if you just grab the bottom like that, you can start a little bit before, right? And then you can end a little bit before the end. So in other words, after the note stops playing, but before the next note starts playing. Okay, here we go. It's still clicking, right? So I have to go back a little further. Not liking that, right? So let me see if I can draw that up and make it a little bit more. So it's still clicking. I don't like that, right? So this is part of learning how to do this stuff. You got to experiment, right? Let me go way back. I don't like the way that that's happening. So let me try drawing in automation like that. That's better. And then right here, we can start doing a gradual change. And then we can maybe just do something like this. Again, where we maybe if I wasn't so extreme, it might not click. And so you got to play around with the stuff. Right? And then we can do a little bit of a decrescendo at the end here like this. Right. So you can really animate the sounds, which is kind of cool. All right, let's take a look at our next one, which is this hybrid sequencer.
These are all expand sounds, right?
Correct. Everything. That's why I had you do this all in expand so that everybody could have access to the same set of tools as I'm teaching. Also, Chris.
How did the EQ knob show up in expand?
Oh, because it was selected by the programmers for this particular sound as one of the smart mobs. Oh, let's actually take a look at what it does. All right, I didn't show that. So here it's right here. Here we go. See, it's moving around. Now, the thing is you have to develop taste. So, Chris, if you look over in the clips area now, you see I added all those other tracks in the flute to strings. See how they showed up here? So that's what the clips window does. It keeps tracks of all the clips in your session.
Can you automate more than one knob at the same time?
Correct. As many knobs as they have.
Okay. And then how would you go about doing that? Would they each be on a separate
Correct. So
okay.
Like I think I can show you. I'll show you this on this next example. I think I'll be able to do that. All right.
Okay.
Oh, not on this example. On this example, I'll be able to show you that. Yeah, but I can show you some stuff with this. Let's see. What do I have set up for this one? Oh, okay. All right. So again, this one has, yeah. So notice that this particular preset, hybrid sequencer, is made up of 2 parts, right? And so if you go to these individual part knobs, they've got different sets of controls. So I'm going to turn off B, right? Remember how to do that. So you can hear how when I play a note, I'm just going to play a note and let go of the key very quickly. Beam, beam, right? That's delay. That's echo. So what happens if I take this mix knob and turn it up? Right? That gets louder. Or if I take the decay release, that's kind of cool too. All right, so I like this. This I could do some cool stuff with. So this is Midi CC81. Okay, so I'm just going to remember that, 81. If you have a little note or your phone, you can take out a note. And then, and you can remember that 81 is one of the ones I'm going to automate. And then this has, I'm going to turn off B, which I did. That's this breathy phaser here. Metal level, what is that? Oh, I'm on the wrong page. Here we go. See, all right, I made a mistake. Let me go back. Yeah, okay, I made a mistake. See, it's like this stuff is a little confusing, but you got to just stick with it. So I'm on part B now. That's this steamy pipes. With this phaser, I'm going to do that 81 bit. Now I'm going to go to B, and these pipes here. Okay, so that does something cool. So which one is that? That's 27. So 88, 81 and 27, right? Okay, so I'm going to go here. And I'm going to add and remove controllers. So 27 is right here. I'm going to add that. And then I'm going to go to 81, which is between 64 and 101. 81, and I'm going to add that. And I'm going to go OK. And let's see if they both show up. 81 and 27. All right, so 81 is this decay release thingy. So I've got A selected now. And I'm going to just play around with something, right? I've got an idea. So I'll go to 81. And I'm going to make it so it starts off sharp, crisply, and then gets a little bit more fuzzy. So you see that that's too much, right? So maybe that's enough. So if I make it a little bit longer so that we go like right to about there. So it's going to start off really crispy. And the notes get longer. And then go back down again. Right? And then up. So let's see. You see how funky that is with the echo? It's cool. Okay, great. So that works out really well, and I like the way that sounds. And then let me turn on B. And let's go to 27. And we're going to play around with the body level, right? So again, I'm going to start off maybe a little bit and bring it up till we get to here and then back down. And let's just hear what that sounds like. So Ashley, if I hit the plus sign here, we can see both lanes at the same time. We just have to select that it's 27 and 81. They're both doing the same thing, right? Oh no, let's go to 81. Great, they're not doing exactly the same thing. What if I did this? So that's pretty cool. All right. So you get a sense of how you can transform the sounds, right? And what the purpose of this exercise is there's multiple things that you're learning here. You're learning how to animate sounds. You're learning how to get more out of a simple plugin like Expand, where you can get some really cool sounds out of it with a little tweaking. You're getting used to not just playing presets, so you can get rid of preset-itis. Which is a bad disease we all have to fight. And the other thing I'm getting you to do is think about it. This helps with mixing because you're playing around with the sound and you're learning how to layer things and make things balance correctly. Like how much of that effect, how fast should that change? You know, how far should the change go? That's all part of mixing. You know, so you're getting it on a smaller, like almost like on a micro level, right? And so I think this is a really good exercise. So we're going to do one more example here, all right? So we've got this dream ARP. So as you can see here, I'm just playing a chord. And the sound is arpeggiating, which means that I've got the arpeggiator turned on. It's just doing up and down in 16th notes. I went over that a couple of weeks ago. But let's go here. So now, if we look here, these are our effects sends. And this will dovetail nicely into next week's lesson. We have FX1, which is set to chorus and reverb, and FX2, which is set to ping pong, which is kind of a delay. These can be automated. So we'll automate both of them and see what we get. So 91 and 93. So I'm right-clicking on those knobs. 91 and 93. Go to here, go to add, remove controllers, 91 and 93. So we got 91, we're going to add, and 93, we're going to add. Okay, so 91 was phase reverb. So let's see if we bring that gradually in, how that sounds. This is moving here. It's adding some reverb, but I want to do something that's a little bit more dramatic. So I'm going to go to Dense Hall. This is like a big room like Lefrak Hall. So you hear it's very dry. It's getting wetter. There's more reverb being added to the sound. Okay, so that might be too much, so we might want to tone that down. So what you can do is you can just use your trimmer tool and click and just drag down. You see how that line changes? So that's pretty cool. Now let's go to the other one, which is 93. And with this one, I'm going to use the triangle shape, right? And I'm going to go to the grid. I'm going to make the grid be a half note. And I'm just going to draw my triangle. Whoops. Let me start from the top. Let me start from here. There we go. And let me clean up that beginning one. Let's see what that sounds like. So what's happening is that the delay, the effect, this one here. See how that's moving in rhythm? So what's happening here is that you're getting the delay only with the upper notes of the arpeggio and not with the lower notes. Right? Think about it. This is going up and down, right, in 16th notes. So it's going up and then down, just like this. So there's very little delay on the lower notes, and most of the delay is coming in on the higher pitched notes.
Switch the screen.
Oh, thank you, Al. Okay, so see that? And if you listen to that, the only delay you're hearing is the top notes. You're not really hearing delay from the bottom notes, and that's good for keeping mud out of your mix. And we can see that this is moving here rhythmically. It's like a windshield wiper. So that's pretty cool, right? Okay, one more, and then we'll call it a day. Always save your work as you're doing this stuff. You don't want to, after every little thing you do, you should be saving. So I've got like a synth guitar here. It's really silly. Okay, so what can we do here? So notice we've got two guitars, one in A and one in B, the same sound. And if we zoom in, we can see that one is panned all the way over to the right and the other one is panned all the way over to the left, right? And that was this preset, Dirty Amped 56. Now, if we go here, we notice that amp select. So what does that mean? That's interesting. And drive. So I'm going to turn off B and I'm going to let it play and I'm going to play around with this knob. So that's a nice round sound, that one here. Did you see how the timbre changed as I went through that? Like this one over here is very nasally. It sounds like mosquitoes, like a guitar player that was in a band I was in when I was 19. Oh, I hope he never watches this. Anyway, only kidding. He was fantastic. And this one sounds rounder over here. What if I turn up the drive? Okay, so I like this. I think what I want to do is when the note, I change the attack to make it a little softer so I sound more like Alan Holdsworth instead of, you know, crappy picking on a keyboard every note. But if I right click, maybe on some of those long sustained notes, I might want to turn the drive up. So what number is that? So that's 19. And let's look at B. It's got the same ones. So it's got very clicky, right? So that's the attack. I want to soften that attack a little bit. Or is that the frets amount? Interesting. There's something else happening with this one that's really weird. Okay, so maybe with this one, I'll want to try a different amp. So you can't hear this, but I can hear that there's two different amps sounding, which is kind of nice. So what's the drive on B? The drive on B is 29 and 19. Okay. 29 and 19. So I'm going to do this where on some of the longer notes, I'm going to turn up the drive, like right just one in three spots here in 3 spots. So 29 and 19, I believe. Is that correct? Let me double check. I can remember lyrics of songs from 1971, but I can't remember numbers from 2 seconds ago. Yes, 29 and 19. Hey, Paul. This file is up on the higher part of the chat towards the beginning of the class. Scroll up, you'll see all the material for today's class. Okay. So,
thanks. I'll check it out.
Yeah, it's here now. So we're going to add 19 and 29, right? Oh no, Pro Tools has quit unexpectedly. Oh my goodness. See, if I hadn't saved all that stuff, I would have lost it all. All right, so we're right here. So we're going to do 29 and 19. Let's fit that in there. And we're going to add 19. Whoops, add. And make sure that guitar is selected. And 29, add. Great. So 19. All right, so we've got a long note there. So we're going to bring our drive up and then drive back down. And we're going to do that with both of them. Yeah, so you can really hear that pinch harmonic come in, which is kind of cool. And maybe we'll go here. All right, so I came down too far with these. Right, we've lost all the drive, so we're going to have to see. This is why you play around with the stuff, right? And then you realize what you've done. That's not right, and then you fix it. And then back up here. Same thing here. And then we've got our last note is a really long note. And we'll just wait to the end, and we'll really crank it up. Yeah. So you can see how that sound changes, right? It's really, this is like where programming can really make your stuff sound more expressive. Okay, so, the Allman Brothers Band. So that's really quite a bit of stuff, right? That we went over today. Famous for its sustain. Yeah, it's the 59 Les Paul. Don't even look at it. There's Spinal Tap. Great movie. You should all watch if you haven't watched it. Actually, on a tangential point, there are a couple of free movies on YouTube that I'm going to suggest you all watch. I'll make a list. You'll just have to suffer with their commercials unless you pay for YouTube like I do on a monthly basis. Yeah, they're really interesting, I think, and they'll be really good. Probably like in a couple of weeks. I won't assign them as you need to do this, but just they're really good. There's 3 really good movies I think you should all see at some point. So orchestration, automation, right? Today, that's what we really focused in on today. And there's a lot of material that we went over. A lot of material. But I think that you don't have to do all of this. Even if you just do a tiny little, like automate the filter so that something's a little brighter and then it's a little darker. Totally fine. You don't have to go crazy with this stuff. What I would suggest is to only do enough that you can keep control of, right? Once you can't control what you're doing too much. You know, there's this whole method of learning an instrument. I was watching, as I often do, a Chick Corea, one of his home videos that he did at the beginning of the lockdown last year. And he was talking about gradients and how you learn things on a gradient, his concept for that, where, you know, he was just playing like a little meditative boom, bum, bum, ba, boom, bum, bum in his left hand. And if you're learning how to improvise, you start on a gradient. If all you can play is whole notes against that in your right hand, 1 note per measure, that's what you play. And as long as you can do that without making a mistake for a few minutes, then you move on to playing half notes. Then you move on to playing 4 notes in a measure, then 8 notes in a measure, while keeping that left hand steady without making any mistakes. And then the second you make a mistake, well, that's you go back a level, you know, because you add on by grading things up, right? So when you're doing this stuff, do easy things. Don't try. We did some sophisticated things, and I wanted to show you the possibilities, things to strive for, things to show you what's really here and how much there can be done, how much work there is that can be done. So, yeah, there you go. So any questions on that? Yay, nay? All right. Well, so get up wherever you are in your assignment. Upload it by tomorrow morning, please. And I will look at these tomorrow afternoon. I've got a meeting, a business meeting at 2 or 1. I'll probably look at these things around in the mid-afternoon. But just if you get them up by the morning tomorrow, I should be able to just make 1 download. And I'll go over all your assignments and get you feedback. The video is up. The review video is up. It won't be edited. It'll be just the entire class, what we've seen here. But the sound will be better because it'll be stereo. And yeah, there you have it. So with that, let me do this here on YouTube. Go to my post.